Okay, this is now live.
Okay. We're going to do the AV switch to the laptop. Sure, give us a thumbs up or a cue. Okay. Jimmy, got that switch here.
T-minus 5 minutes. T-minus 5 minutes. Make sure to pack it in. People coming in. Make sure you got some empty seats filled up. We got a lot of seats here in the middle.
Yeah,
so
switch on the touch panel,
here's the deal.
she'll give us
You'll be able to see yourself on the screen. Can we go live on the screen yet? Okay. Go ahead and start the switch. We've been listening to Australian music,
switch over to the
by the
laptop.
way, that you've been talking over. It's fine. Most of it from the 80s. But the reason I'm saying you might want to go ahead and think about shifting seats is because we can only get so much of a wide angle in this room. So we actually want to make sure that it's filled up here in the middle. So you can already see that we're going to be a little bit wider than that. But anybody that's on the fringe edge over here, they're going to get cut off, right? So you're pretty much like sitting from here over, you're not going to be on the table. Okay? So if I can get some of you all, if you don't mind relocating, make sure we have the center filled up here, right? Make sure we have a full crowd here. And the same probably applies all the way over here in this corner. This corner's probably getting clipped, so if you guys can move over, just make sure we're filled in. I know nobody wants to move, but you never know. You might get discovered to be rich and famous if you're on screen, so move over this way, try to fill up these center seats. We can't have an empty seat in the front row. I mean, come on. Let's get a few people. This is prime time right here, baby. This is prime time, these seats. I just want to make sure that people aren't getting flipped off. Who are going to tell their parents that they're so proud they were here talking to Kevin Rudd. And let the latecomers take the fringe seats. Screw them, they're late, all right? Okay, we got about 4 minutes. 4 minutes. So you can stop waving to yourselves on screen. I mean, you can if you really like. I'd like everybody to chill out now. Let's chill it out. You keep waving to yourself and calm down the conversation. Here's the deal. Here's the deal. We all know who Kevin Rudd is, correct?
Can we turn that down? I did that.
This Kevin Rudd, yeah, that works. All right. Well, we got 4 minutes
Maybe
before
at the
we're going to
source
talk.
it could be
Let
like,
me get a brief introduction
It's
because,
intermittent.
unlike
Okay.
most
A good ear
goofball
catch.
hosts, I'm not going to do some big floral introduction
It's just
on
when
the
he hits
man
one
once he
over.
gets here because his time is limited. He's an important moral figure. So instead of spending 5 minutes
she's gonna
telling him how awesome he is to his face as an introduction, I'm going to go ahead and do it now in the next couple
One
minutes.
thing
So you know
that
who this guy
you may
is.
need to do is
I believe most of you have read the article that he wrote that I sent to you from Fort
start
Pierce.
uploading
He spent
because they won't get
his
right up on
college
record.
career at your age, studying Asian studies and actually going to China and doing, I think, both of his degrees in Chinese language and Chinese history. So this guy is a scholar of Asia altogether, and that was when he was your age. And then he graduated and got into politics and started working for, I believe, kind of the Office of Foreign Affairs, and moved up the ranks of the Labor Party and became the head of the Labor Party. Now, again, we talked a little bit about prime minister positions and how parliaments work around the world. So he became the head of the Labor Party. It's the equivalent kind of the Democratic Party of the United States. So as the head of the Labor Party, when his party won control of the parliament in 2007, he was the guy, he became prime minister of Australia after already having served in several other offices within the government, working his way up the ranks. Okay? He then stepped down as prime minister in 2007 and 2010. When he stepped down, he became foreign minister. Actually, I think he was also like a diplomat to Asia at one point as well. So Kevin Rudd is a man who spent his entire career dedicated to public service and particularly to Asian Chinese studies. This is why we're talking to him. It's not that he's a politician. It's not that he was once the leader of this country. It's that he's done all that and he has spent his whole life paying attention to affairs in Asia, to the greater Pacific Rim, to Australia-Chinese relations, Australia-Asian relations, to U.S.-Asian relations, and even to, I guess, a great extent, U.S.-Australian relations. So this is a guy that knows all about these changes and great stuff that's been happening in the greater Asia-Pacific realm for his entire career. And that's why I want you to ask smart questions, topical questions. We don't really care anything about domestic politics in Australia. That's about as interesting as domestic politics in Ukraine, all right? If you're from there, it's interesting. So we're not going to waste a whole lot of time asking about that stuff. Let's chat with him about the future of what's going on in Australia, the future of what's going on in the greater Pacific realm. And guess what? How much more topical could it be right now with the rise of China, yes, but also with what's going on in the Korean Peninsula. And his paper, of course, is called The Pivot to Asia. That's talking about the United States' turn to be focusing more on the Pacific realm and Asia in general in terms of military, political, and economic power shifts. Cool? Then, now we have, I think, we're good to go? We're good to go from their end? Now you have the general gist. He's watching the Ustream. G'day, mate. Hey, should we do a g'day, mate? Shout out to him. It is, if I think I have it right, it's probably 9 a.m. tomorrow in Australia. So it's Friday morning. He's just, yeah, shout out to Friday, all right? He's just had a huge piece of toast covered with Vegemite, all right? He just finished watching Crocodile Dundee earlier at 6 a.m., all right? So he's up on his Australian culture, and he's probably ready to now share it with us. Cool? Any questions before we get going? Yes. Former Prime Minister, yes. It is my belief, and I have been wrong in the past, but it is my belief that he is likely to be a future Prime Minister of Australia again. So we are chatting and dining with royalty tonight. Well, okay, it's more like a republic than a monarchy, but they still God Save the Queen in Australia. In fact, I only thought to say that because he tweeted me yesterday and said that I should pass on this request to you all, that for all the questions that are asked to him, he only had two simple requests. One, they were easy enough for a politician to answer, and two, that they're given in the proper Queen's English. So we're screwed. All right? I don't know if he knows, but we have a revolution here to kick those folks out. Without any further ado, whenever they're ready, they'll be calling in. And again, I've already done the intro, so we're going to go straight to letting him do a chat for a while on anything he wants to chat about, followed by your questions about all things happening in the world, of which this man has a ton of experience and a lot of foresight. That's why when we talk to him, hopefully you're going to enjoy this and learn a lot from him as well. And then you'll be able to say someday to your kids, I met the Prime Minister of Australia, and he's still Prime Minister 100 years later. All right? Isn't that awesome? All right, so we're ready to go anytime they are, so we can have it. And of course, when he'll pop up on the screen, your inclination is going to be to scream and yell, and that's okay. Okay? Yeah, I know. I'll move over there when he calls. For those that are asking the questions, we're going to be pointing at this particular camera, see if it's working right now. Can you see me, class? Hi, class. Oh, you got it off? Okay. Nobody can see me, sad face. Sad face. And actually, for the question askers, you can hold the microphone if you want. We're having this clamp, but you actually put it pretty close to your mouth. Actually, kind of almost touch your chin with it. So don't be like, hi, sir. No, we won't pick it up. So get all friendly with that microphone. There you go. All right. Pretend like you're Elvis. I don't care. Whatever it takes. Okay. All right. So I think we're ready to go. Whenever they Skype in, I will immediately, basically, as soon as it pops up. Again, you're gonna be like, oh. Hold on, just hold. And I will say, most honorable Mr. Rudd, let me present to you Virginia Tech. And then you can go, batshit crazy, all right? Got it? So we're going to act all proper and civil for a moment, and then I want you to tear it up. Just tear it up, all right? Go all kangaroo koala on this, all right? By the way, did anybody bring a live kangaroo or koala? I was giving bonus points for any live Australian flora or fauna here. So, think we're all good to go? 7:03. Late. A late politician. Go figure. Are you the one that typed in, shall we call you? He hates us already. He didn't like my intro. Darn it. Should have been more loving. If that's the connection, I mean, go ahead. Go ahead, click. Yeah, we'll call them. Let's do it. Just another night here in Blacksburg. We're going to call Australia and talk to the Prime Minister. Dialing. Okay, wait for it. Don't scream if it happens. Wait. Okay, wait. Thank you so much for joining us, most honorable Mr. Rudd. May I present to you Virginia Tech and World Region. And now several people have been failed out of this class. Sorry for that. Well, Mr. Rudd, thanks again so much for joining me. We are Rudd lovers here. We've been following you for years. Think you're a fantastic politician and everything else. We've already done an intro, though. So I wanted to cut to the chase and go ahead and allow as much time for you to talk to us and the students to talk to you. So without any further ado, I'll just say, you're awesome. We know you're awesome. And the floor is yours. And you can open up for questions whenever you like, sir.
Thank you very much. Good day, guys. What time is it there in Virginia?
7 o'clock in the evening yesterday.
Virtually talking to us guys in Australia, can we tell you what's happening tomorrow? It's about 9 o'clock in the morning here, so we've already seen the lines ahead of you, so just settle back and relax. Okay, let me talk a little bit about things I read from Foreign Affairs. Have you read the article, guys? Okay, honestly, Ted, who hasn't read the article?
Sad koala face.
China, as you know, is an emerging power. The state is an established power. Not only is it an established power, it's the world's single remaining superpower. So therefore, in history, if you look at the last 500 years, there is a theory of international relations which says that you end up with a problem. You have a newly emerging power with an established power, which more often than not ends up in conflict. The one exception over the last 500 years was the emergence of the United States at the end of the 19th century, at the time when Britain, the British Empire, was the preeminent established power, and that transition occurred relatively smoothly, minus, of course, the minor exceptions of the American Revolution, the British trying to burn down the White House in 1812, and, of course, the other minor problem of them supporting the Confederacy during the Civil War. But we'll just leave all that one side. The bottom line is that that transition was achieved relatively peacefully. But in the rest of modern history, since the time of the Portuguese Empire, essentially the conflicts have arisen. So therefore, the challenge for statecraft at the beginning of the 21st century is how do you manage the rise of China peacefully? That is a core challenge. So the basis of the article that I've written is to take reality as it exists in the year 2013 and work out how we chart a course forward. And so what I call for in that article is a new strategic roadmap for US-China relations. What do I mean by that? It means that the core challenge is to carve out a number of domains where the United States and the China Act can now begin to strategically cooperate, both on questions concerning the global international rules-based order, the regional rules-based order here in Asia, and, of course, bilaterally between China and the United States as well. Putting some flesh on those bones, what have I recommended? At a global rules-based order level, there's a whole bunch of stuff which at present is not working properly. Let me just go to a couple of examples. If you look at what's happening with global nuclear non-proliferation at present, then what you'll see is that the nuclear non-proliferation treaty has been by and large ineffective in preventing the breakout of a number of states developing nuclear weapons. We can point to what's happening in North Korea, which is highly topical at present. We also point to what's emerging as a new challenge in Iran. Other areas in the current global order which are not working effectively are, for example, the global negotiations on climate change, where presently we're making very, very slow progress. Also on trade negotiations, if you look at the fact that the Doha round of free trade negotiations is not producing any real result, these are areas where I believe China and the United States can pick one single definable issue within the global rules-based order, say it's not working, how can we too make it work together? What's the strategic logic of that? It's because our friends in Beijing also include this global regional rules-based order. This global rules-based order can work for them as well. Take China's history over the last 30 years. It has been advantaged enormously by the fact that there's been a relatively open international trading regime which has helped them build so much of their economy through exports and relatively open export markets around the world. So how do you take that further from a Chinese national interest point of view? On climate change, China now is the world's largest emitter, followed by you guys in the United States of America. The key for the future of the planet is to get China and the United States to cooperate and to agree and to act on bringing down their carbon emissions. Otherwise, we roll the clock ahead 10, 20, even 50 years' time, and frankly, it starts to look pretty challenging for the planet. And China itself, from its national interest, sees a huge potential value in global cooperation and national action by themselves on climate change and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, because they don't want to, frankly, throttle their own capacity for them becoming a great power by the environmental damage done within their own country. Ruining Chinese agriculture, drying up watercourses, changing forever the pattern of Chinese agricultural production. That's on the global rules-based order front. I also argue in the article that we should also identify a key issue or two within the regional rules-based order here in Asia, where Australia has its home. If you look at the current security environment across Asia at present, it's a pretty weird environment. You know why? You've got all these economies that are doing fantastically well, beneficiaries of what you describe as full-scale 21st century economic globalization, bringing these economies and people closer together. At the same time, if you look at the security policy reality, it resembles very much late 19th century, early 20th century Europe. It's a bit of a tinderbox. You've got these two conflicting realities. In fact, the security environment here in East Asia sometimes reminds me of Dodge City 1860 and the potential for the last shootout here at Cape Coral. I mean, this is not a benign environment. Therefore, between China and the United States, let's encourage both governments to cooperate clearly on the immediate challenge of North Korea and the future of reunification on the Korean Peninsula. And more broadly across East Asia, we've got these security tensions between China and Japan in the East China Sea, and China and Southeast Asia in the South China Sea, to bring about some rules of the road so you avoid conflict by miscalculation. In international relations literature, that's called confidence and security building measures. The type the Europeans developed after the Helsinki Accords in 1975, we've got no rules for the road on basic security policy questions in Asia at all, here in the year 2013. And finally, what I argue in the article is that at a bilateral level, one of the big emerging political and security issues between China and the United States and across the rest of the world is what's called cybersecurity. You'll be familiar with this. You're children of the information age, and you know what cyber attacks can do to information systems, to private corporations, and the public infrastructure. At present, we don't have any rules for the road on this. So what I've also recommended is that China and the US together, through their most senior military commanders at the US level, the Chairman of Chiefs of Staff and his Chinese equivalent, also get together to work out a framework for negotiations to establish minimum rules for the road to help that process into the future. I think I might leave it there in broad terms, but simply to conclude on this point, that when you're looking at the future of China-US relations, and frankly looking at international relations much more generally, you've got two basic alternatives. Either you can take what is described as a determinist view of history, which is there ain't nothing much we can do about all this, it's all drifting in a particular direction, and frankly it's a negative direction, and its inevitable consequence, given the differences between the two systems, is conflict and maybe even war. Or alternatively, you can develop an alternative plan which changes strategic mindsets in China, in the United States, in Beijing, and in Washington. This is not an appeal to sort of mindless idealism and saying, let's all proclaim peace, brotherhood, and universal cooperation starting tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Blacksburg time. It's actually saying you've got to develop a roadmap to build trust step by step. And that's why the roadmap I've outlined in the Foreign Affairs article seeks to do that. Bite-sized chunks, areas of cooperation, globally, regionally, bilaterally, through which you begin to develop at least a basis of strategic trust between China and the United States, creating what I describe as strategic ballast in the relationship, like you got on the bottom of the ship, so that when crises emerge, either between China and the United States or among the regional states here in East Asia, some of that strategic trust can be drawn upon to manage those crises. In the absence of that, what happens, as history tells us this, is that crises can actually just spiral out of control. So my overall argument is to make that work, we need to see a regular pattern of symmetry between the new president of China, Xi Jinping, who I've met a number of times in the past when I was Prime Minister of this country, and your President, Barack Obama, who's just been re-elected for his second term. I think this creates a great new opportunity for these two newly elected and appointed presidents to work on such a roadmap for the future. That's why I've written the article, and I hope that the governments both in Washington and Beijing take the idea up. Thank you for listening.
If you don't mind, Mr. Rudd, we actually have a technical difficulty where the screen is frozen here. So I hate to do this, but can I hang up on you? No, wait. It's more proper if you hang up on me. I think that's the order. And if you can hang up, it will call back and hopefully it'll reset the screen for us.
Okay, guys.
We just got hung up on by Kevin Rudd. Technical difficulties do happen when you're talking to the other side of the planet.
I gather I'm like a puppet from the Thunderbirds doing this, you know?
Yes! Exactly like that. Crikey! How did you know? All right. Why don't we go ahead and, again, with no further ado, this is a time for students to interact with you from the other side of the planet. So come on up, and we're just going to field one at a time. Feel free at any time, even though you're not an American citizen, to plead the fifth and not answer a question. But I have a feeling they're all pretty good questions that are in your realm that you'll love to talk about.
Hello, Mr. Rudd. Can you hear me? Okay, all right, perfect. Hello, Mr. Rudd. My name is Cody Haynes, and I'm a senior here at Virginia Tech. I just want to say it's an honor to be speaking with you. Well, thank you. Okay, I'm sorry. My first question to you, sir, is a three-part question. You can choose to answer whatever you like. So I'll start off. Amid the current tensions in the Southeastern Asia area, including North Korea and all around that region, my first question is, what is the general response from the people of Australia towards the tensions that are rising there? My second question to you is, if anything has happened, or if not, has it affected trade at all with the area of countries, neighboring countries around you, your country? And also, the last thing that I would like to ask is, what is your diplomatic opinion on the situation as a whole, and what is a safe solution to the tensions for
Okay, thanks, Cody. You've really got two sets of them at the moment, maybe three. The one which is popular today is what's happening in the Korean Peninsula, in particular the outrageous acts by the North Korean regime. Australians are always anxious about what the North Koreans do and say. The simple reason is this is a war which we and the United States participated in between 1950 and 1953, and which many Americans died and a large number of Australians died as well. So we have an historical investment in the future freedom of Korea. Secondly, when we look at Kim Jong-un, the new leader of North Korea, his actions are increasingly erratic, and because he is less than 30 years of age, we actually don't believe he necessarily has the experience of the North Korean leader to know when he's going too far. Thirdly, what we're concerned about is that if they undertake another provocation against the South, like they've done over the last 3 years through bombing a South Korean island or through sinking a South Korean naval vessel, then the ability for the South Korean government and the newly elected President Park just to sit around and let all that happen without responding politically is becoming, I think, increasingly improbable. Therefore, there is a real risk of escalation. So we in Australia follow these developments very closely. Your second point is security tensions in Asia more broadly and their impact on trade and economic activity. The Korean Peninsula is one set of security issues. I said there are two others. One's in the East China Sea between China and Japan over conflicting territorial claims in a couple of little islands which are called either Senkaku Japanese or Yaeyudao Chinese. Then you've got the South China Sea. We have 6 or 7 states with conflicting territorial claims. And these tensions have risen to the surface at various times over the last 12 months or so. In terms of the impact on Australia's trade, up until now, our export markets in East Asia have remained not just constant, but continue to grow. And so these tensions have been factored in. However, where you do see an impact is in China-Japan trade. And these are the second and third largest economies in the world. And in Asia, the first and second largest economies in Asia. And what you see there is a real impact on the bilateral trade flows between those two countries because of political tensions over the conflicting territorial disputes. We are worried about the wash-on effect of that. Finally, in terms of diplomatic solutions, as I said before in my general remarks, I think it's smart for the United States and China now to work together on Korean contingency planning in terms of what you do in response to the commencement of any exchange between North and South Korea to manage the tensions down and to begin long-term to plan for Korean reunification in a way which matches China's national security needs as well as the national security needs of South Korea. I think I'll leave it there, but thank you for the question.
We still have the same video issue, so instead of hanging up, maybe if you could click on your video button and maybe turn your video off and then turn it back on, maybe reset it. So
Yeah, people are laughing.
otherwise, we can still hear you. We know what you look like and you're awesome.
I'm not so keen for much. Let's try that. I'll continue to watch it.
Actually, what we'll do every time it starts to lock again, when it locks, the person will tell you before they ask the question, please reset that, and I'm going to ask my question. There you go.
First of all, good morning, Mr. Rudd. My name is Greg Crow, and
Good evening, Greg.
as you said, that the Southeast Asian region has a lot of booming economies, especially places like India and China, but also it's a place of conflict still. There's still a lot going on. So my question would be, what's your plan for future trade relations with this whole region?
Well, if we're talking about Australia, we have a very open trade relationship with most of the big economies of the region. For example, China is our number 1 trading partner, Japan's our number 2 trading partner. India, I think, comes in about Korea comes in number 3, India probably about number 5. Of our top 10 trading partners in Australia, 8 or 9 of them are in Asia. In recent times, we have developed a free trade agreement bilaterally with Singapore, also a free trade agreement with what's called the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, more importantly. You put that together, it represents in toto probably about $3.5 trillion worth of economic activity between the economies of Southeast Asia combined and Australia. Australia itself, by the way, is the 4th largest economy in Asia. Number 1, China, number 2, Japan, number 3, India, number 4, us guys, like a kangaroo. And therefore, at the bulk of our trade engagement in this part of the world. So therefore, our free trade arrangements in Southeast Asia and Australia are pretty good. We currently have free trade agreement negotiations underway with Japan, with China, and also with India. These are going to be very long and difficult negotiations simply because of the size of those economies. And finally, there is another proposal which we're working on with the Obama administration. It's called a Trans-Pacific Partnership. If you're in trade jargon, you'll hear the words TPP. The TPP aims to link the economies of East Asia in a wider free trade agreement across the region as well. All this is good because if you grow the regional economies through open economic engagement, you actually hopefully also reduce the risks of security policy conflict as well through greater and more intense economic engagement. Thanks, mate.
Hello, Mr. Rudd. My name is Noah Rogers, and I'll be asking the next question. Mr. Rudd.
You're from the Bronx, you're lost?
No, I'm actually, I did a program, airport program there, so I just moved over to New York. But question.
Turn around and show what's on your t-shirt.
Okay.
Bronx is you're in Virginia, and that's quite a way away.
Yes, yes, it is. Yeah, it's a lot different too, for sure.
There's more people in Laxburg, I can
All right. Mr. Rudd, as you know, the country of Myanmar has recently made some significant changes to not only its government, but also its demeanor towards other states, especially those outside of the East Asian region. Tai Shen, the first president of Myanmar since March of 2011, has led the government to be more open to foreign investment and has held parliamentary elections in 2012, which included Nobel Prize winner Aung Suu Kyi, who was formerly under house arrest for 15 years under the 40-year rule of the foreign military junta to become a member of the parliament. My question to you, Mr. Rudd, is what can countries such as Australia and other Western powers do to help push Myanmar to keep moving forward directly democratically, and do you believe these changes made by Myanmar's government are here to stay?
Thanks, mate. Thanks for the question. Number one, we in Australia for a long time have had a very significant aid relationship with Myanmar, or Burma, as it's sometimes called. In fact, globally, Burma's two most important aid partners are firstly Britain and secondly Australia. I think when I last looked at the numbers, we're providing about $85 million annually worth of development assistance to the Burmese. We're running a whole series of programs there, including those dealing with communicable diseases, including HIV/AIDS. And when I was last in the capital myself, Yangon, or Rangoon as it's sometimes called, I looked at some of those projects. More broadly, that has actually enabled us as Australia to have a pretty good continuing relationship with Burma, Myanmar, despite the nature of the governments of Burma, Myanmar over a long period of time. As Foreign Minister of Australia, I went in there and visited in June of 2011. I think I was probably the first Western Foreign Minister to go in there for a long time. Some of my colleagues around the world, as other foreign ministers, were a bit nervous about it at the time. But we had been back-channeling to Aung San Suu Kyi, the democratic leader that you just referred to. and she had strong connections with the Myanmar Burmese immigrant community in Australia, and we were receiving strong signals of encouragement that we should go in. So in June of 2011, I went in and then went up to the Burmese capital, which is called Naypyidaw. If you go to Myanmar, you must go to Naypyidaw. It's in the middle of nowhere, and it's a capital which has just kind of been built. And it's a 4-hour drive, and there's no real other way of getting there. I went and saw the president you mentioned, Thein Sein. We had a long conversation about the recent elections which have been held in Burma. I asked him specifically about how he would be able to provide physical protection for Aung San Suu Kyi in her travels around Burma as a participant in the subsequent elections that you just referred to, which saw her elected to the parliament for the first time. I then went back to Rangoon or Yongbyon. I had lunch with Aung San Suu Kyi, and we talked about the land. We talked about how we could take all this forward further with the Burmese government. And what she asked me to do was then to correspond on her behalf with the Burmese regime, and their interior minister in particular, who's responsible for internal security, to ensure that she could be provided guarantees of her personal security as she campaigned for those elections. Given that she had been in the slammer, you call it the slammer in the United States? House arrest, anyway. 20 years. The end of the story is that by and large, that period, it is opening to the web, basically, achieved time. Your final question is it simple? I don't really, it's hard to say. I don't think we should, to paraphrase that, look on the flow, let us see what happens in the argument and mind. Okay.
Hi, Mr. Rudd. My name is Zoe Carroll, and I have a more personal question for you. I know that you majored in Chinese history and Chinese language, and I was just wondering what made you interested in China? What got you into China?
Thank you for the question. Any of you guys out there ever grow up on a farm? Keep your hands up, keep your hands up. Okay. I grew up on a farm too. Here in southeast Queensland, where I'm speaking to you on Skype this morning. And when I was about 2 years old, I was on a horse next to my father. My father turned around to me and said, Kev, he always called me Kev, which was short for Kev. He said, have you made your mind up, son? And I said, Dad, I'm not quite sure what you mean. And he said, have you made a big decision about your future? I said, Dad, I'm not sure what you mean. He said, have you decided your future? Is it going to be beef cattle or dairy cattle? Now, I am not anti-cattle, okay? I'm not anti-dairy, I'm not anti-beef. In fact, my home state is one of the biggest beef exporters in the world. And you should eat more of it there, you guys at the university. But the bottom line is, I didn't foresee myself having a huge career in animal husbandry. My mother, God bless her soul, had bought a bookshelf at home on architecture, and in it there was a chapter up the back on Chinese classical architecture, and to me that looked like a fantastic alternative to a future in dairy industry.
Good morning, Mr. Rudd. My name is Scotty Coyne, and here's my question. One aspect of China that has always fascinated me is the prevalence of those with technical backgrounds, i.e. engineering in its government, compared to the US, or correct me if I'm wrong, Australia. Why is this the case, and how does it affect the way we engage with China?
Well, Scotty, that's an excellent question because it goes to the nature of the two education systems, frankly. And if you speak to the Chinese and their leadership, so many of them are engineers, or some of them are actually more broadly research scientists. So when it comes to designing a dam, building a road, or working out the next generation of jet engines, these guys aren't superb. And the reason for that is that many of them were trained in the days of China-Soviet Union cooperation, where the Soviets had this also strong culture of, let's call them the hard sciences, the physical sciences. And as a result, this had a big influence the way in which Chinese academic institutions developed just after Chinese liberation. So in the 50s and 60s and 70s, you see all these effective, the Chinese equivalents of Soviet polytechnics, teaching physics, chemistry, mathematics, and the core science disciplines. Now this is a great strength for China. So when you see these guys laying out the physical infrastructure of the country, ports, rail, road, electricity systems, telecommunication systems, fiber optic cable, this is done with a huge degree of what I describe as national engineering precision. The weakness of China's education system is this, and though our Chinese friends readily admit it, it is the absence of a culture of creative innovation. And in the universities and the academic institutions, this has not been a strong tradition. The great virtue of university cultures like yours in the United States and ours in Australia is that we try and inculcate in our young people a view that go out there, innovate and create and build. And go and build your own businesses as well. This has been a much smaller feature of the Chinese educational system. So much so that in the 12th five-year plan, brought down by the Chinese in the year 2010, if you look at the core principles contained within it, there are two. One, at a macroeconomic level, how to change the Chinese economic growth model into one which is more consumer-oriented in the future. That's natural and normal for any developing country to move along the economic development curve. But the second one is a core strategic priority of how to encourage, build, and create a new culture in China of research, innovation, development, and creativity. And that is where they know they have a weakness. There is no Chinese equivalent in Silicon Valley. There just isn't. And that is a huge gap between China and the United States. And frankly, when people around the world, I think, unfairly write off the United States as a superpower whose time has come and gone, I think they radically underestimate the capacity of the United States to self-regenerate through its enormous entrepreneurial culture and its culture of scientific innovation and creative development. That is the core soft power strength of the USA.
Good morning, my name is Chris Roper, and I have a question about the Association of Southeast Asian Nations that you mentioned earlier. I was wondering...
Very funny that it's a bit out.
I was wondering on the future of Asian, do you think it will become more like the EU in terms of cultural diffusion, free movement of people, policy making, and do you think Australia will ever become a full-time member?
That's a great question. Association of Southeast Asian Nations, we call it ASEAN or ASEAN, down the outside of the world, is a great success story. Look at its history. Over the last 40 years, when it began in the late 60s, you had the non-communist states, by and large, authoritarian states of Southeast Asia, forming a de facto cooperative arrangement pitted against the communist states of then Indochina. In particular, oops, I think I've gone on static again, have I? Okay, we'll try and adjust this again.
Yeah, we can still hear you.
I have the phone with me. trying to retrace my proof there. So, Afghan, the rest success story, began as a grouping effectively dividing sort of Southeast Asia between communist and non-communist states. Roll the clock on 40 years, we now have a grouping of 10 states in Southeast Asia. I think I've gone static again. Back again. 10 states in Southeast Asia, which now have many forms of common cooperation. Essentially, there is a loose form of political and security cooperation. There is a strong form of economic integration, and also it has effectively preserved a high degree of strategic peace and stability in Southeast Asia, which has prevailed since the end of the Vietnam War in 1975. And that's quite a time ago now. And that peace and stability has underpinned the phenomenal economic growth you've seen in these economies ever since. So we've now got communist Vietnam cooperating very effectively with democratic Indonesia on common tasks of economic development. And so this is a strong building block of peace and stability across East Asia. In fact, there is another grouping in East Asia called the East Asian Summit, which you guys in the United States are now members of as well. So what does that mean? You've got the ASEAN countries, 10 of them in Southeast Asia, now linked with the Northeast Asian three, China, South Korea, and Japan. Then also with India, Australia, and New Zealand. And now with Russia and the United States. This is a newly formed institution in terms of American participation. And we hope in the future it will develop in the direction of an East Asian community, what I more broadly call an Asia-Pacific community. And Australian diplomacy will be in there, boots and all, to try and bring that about into the long term. Thanks for your question.
Hello, Mr. Rudd. My name is Matthew Hartman. I'm a senior engineer.
Yeah, Matthew.
I'm talking to you over the internet halfway across the world, and that relates to my question. Australia is rolling out the National Broadband Network, and for those that don't know, that seeks to bring 93% approximately of Australians fiber optic speed network to their home. It's a huge project, $37 billion, $30 billion from the government. So I was wondering what you thought the impact of this infrastructure investment would be on the future of Australia, not just domestically, but also in the global context.
Well, thank you for the question, Matthew. It's pretty important. Think of Australia, by the way, guys, if you get your map out. Australia minus Alaska is about as big as the continental United States. Our population is 23 million, which is half the population of California. So we have a little challenge here in terms of rolling out infrastructure across a vast space for a relatively small number of people. Secondly, Australia in its economic history has suffered from what we describe as, in this country, as the tyranny of distance. Distance within the country, but distance between Australia and the rest of the world. Whenever I speak to US politicians in Washington or politicians in Europe, and you say, we should come on down and spend some time with us, they say, quote, but it's so far, unquote. To which I say, well, for God's sake, anything we feel, we travel up in the part of the world. So the virtue of the internet, the virtue of the National Broadband Network is to create high-speed broadband for 90% plus of Australians in order to create a connectivity with the rest of the world, which is at least the equal of, and I think better than most of the speeds offered in the world. So when I was Prime Minister, we launched this project. It was an election commitment we gave back in 2007. And the project now is very large scale. It's the biggest capital works project this country has ever seen, funded by the federal government. It aims to be concluded by 2020, 2021. It's like building, frankly, an entire new national railway network. 93% plus of the country, broadband speeds of 100 megabits per second plus, and directly linked to each premise, that is each household or each business across that part of Australia. And for the remaining percentage who are too remote, then we will opt on wireless and satellite technologies with speeds on average of between 12 So the whole idea is to connect. And why is this important? Two core reasons. As you know, in the United States, so much of business activity is being transferred online. And therefore, for us to deal with our customers domestically and internationally, and our suppliers domestically and internationally, your ability to use a tube which can get our stuff to you and your stuff to us in a nanosecond and in huge quantity will be the defining characteristic of which economies succeed and fail in the 21st century. And the second reason is this: it's the delivery of government services, whether it's in health, whether it's in education or other areas. Because now, if you're able to have that bandwidth delivering the best education programs, the best course programs, the best subject presentations to schools and colleges and universities right across Australia, from anywhere in the world, puts you right out there. But also, in basically the delivery of remote area medicine and telemedicine, it means that you can have surgical procedures down the line as surgeons receive instructions from those who are specialists in the field back in capital cities, as well as a whole series of counselling and GP-related services, which is too difficult to physically move people 1,000 kilometres from where they are to the major centres which actually have that concentration of medical expertise. It's part of the 21st century revolution. It's a bit like building the railway network in the 21st century. And when you look back to the 19th century, when you built yours and we built ours, frankly, it takes some time. And it means that you've got to make sure that these projects work. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Rudd. My name is Christopher Scott, and I want to know, first off, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing good, and much better, Chris, than seeing you in your suit and your tie. You just been to a Rotary meeting?
And what I would like to know is, with the rise of China's influence in Southeast Asia and the possibility of a North Korean missile strike, would Australia be open to more permanent United States military bases, even for cybersecurity, as you mentioned earlier, to start working out a system close by to China? And why or why not?
Sure. Well, Australia, for you guys there, is one of your oldest continuing allies, basically from 1941 to the present. And I assume most of you were born since 1941, am I right? That was orange. And so, since 1941, we've worked very closely with the United States on every security challenge that we've confronted together across wider Asia. Secondly, in terms of our alliance, which is called the ANZUS Alliance, ANZUS Alliance, I've gone on that funny thing again. I would be back with you even more. Are we back?
Yes, sir.
We've got some serious gremlins there in Union Tech. I'm assuming they're in your side of the Pacific and not mine. Or maybe it's the ocean, who knows. And so, as a result of our security alliance with the United States, we have an annual security talk with the Americans, which is called AUSMIN, AUSMIN. I participated in a recent result. The Foreign Minister and the Prime Minister I met all the American representatives, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and former Defense Secretary and others, including Bob Gates. The level of cooperation we already have in key areas of cybersecurity. I think you could be confident that what can be done is being done in that domain. You spoke also about relevance of Australia to US border diplomacy in Asia. We've had US troops in Darwin and territory for a long, long time on training rotations of 3 months at a stretch, involving 1,500 Marines. We've now extended that to 2,500 Marines in 6 months at a stretch, and we intend to provide them with first-class Australian beer.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the question, and that, again, it's a profound one. And the reason is this. In the 20th century, what happened in Asia mattered for, let's go on the wall again. I'm back. We Australians are persistent. We know that. On the key thing about Asian security is this. In the 20th century, the security of Asia mattered to Asians themselves, including Australians, because we see ourselves as part of Asia, for our economies, but more also for our peoples. In the 21st century, the future strategic stability of Asia now matters not just for Asia, it matters for the world. Why is that the case? Because the relative proportion of economic growth now coming to the global economy out of Asia is more important than any other driver of economic growth globally coming out of either Europe or the United States for that matter. And so if you're looking at the strength of the 21st century economy, the bulk of the growth will come out of emerging Asia. China, I believe, the economic resurgence of Japan, India, Indonesia, a country of 250 million people, the largest Muslim country of the world, our neighbours here in Southeast Asia, and the wider region itself. So therefore, a paramount concern globally is for us to preserve the peace and stability of Asia. And that's why, for example, you have proposals such as the one I put forward for how you deal with a new strategic roadmap for US-China relations in terms of maximising strategic stability and cooperation in the future and minimising the risks of strategic conflict. And across wider East Asia itself, using the institution I referred to called the East Asian Summit to maximise a sense of common security community in East Asia based on pretty basic confidence and security building measures. Let me give you one example. How do you build rules of the road for maritime East Asia so that when you have incidents at sea, like a Coast Guard vessel running across a naval vessel from another country in a maritime area which is flanked by boat, and preventing that from escalating into a full-on conflict or worse. We don't have rules of the road for that at the moment. We need to develop them. The good news is we now have the institutional machinery to do it through the East Asia Summit, but the work is just beginning. Thank you for your question.
Hello, Mr. Rudd. My name is Benjamin Waxler, and I have a question to you in regard to Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks. He recently announced that he was going to be running for office for a Senate seat in Australia, and I was wondering what your thoughts on that were and what kind of effect that might have on foreign policy in the right.
Well, that's a good question. The Commonwealth of Australia, like the Commonwealth of Virginia, and like the United States of America, we're a free country. Anyone can stick up their hand and run for elected office. And that goes for people like Mr. Assange as well. How we will go in the elections, we have no idea. Our elections are a completely open race, and it's difficult to predict at this stage whether he will succeed or not. So on the hypothesis of what effect he would have in terms of if he was elected to the Australian Parliament, I think I'll just leave that one be. I won't plead the fifth, but I will say that frankly it's just too hard to predict in terms of whether he's going to get there or whether he won't. But as I said, we pride ourselves in our political freedom. Any person from the extreme left to the extreme right can stick their hand up and run for elected office. He's as entitled to that as any other citizen of Australia. Okay, that's a good question too. I think I've frozen, have I now?
Yes.
At least I'm not wobbling, I'm just frozen. That's what returning full animated colours. I'm back. Any of you guys studying Chinese language? You can see a few hands go up. Okay, it's a very smart investment for the future, guys, because your generation is going to be dealing with arriving in China through until mid-century. Don't assume, by the way, by the time we get to the end of the century, that English will be the inevitable universal language. So I would take seriously the study of Chinese and the other languages of Asia. Secondly, what's really interesting about the new Chinese president, Xi Jinping, is that he's put forward his own concept of China's future relationship with the United States. He calls it a new type of great power relationship. The Chinese students among you is called Xinqing Daguo Huanxi, and that's basically it, a new framework for the future relationship between these great powers. But if you look underneath it, what's he actually saying? The Chinese have studied intimately the history of the rise and fall of great powers over the last 500 years. In fact, they ran a 12-part series on Central Chinese television on this about 5 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, everywhere from the rise and fall of the Portuguese Empire to the present. But here's the concept. They argue that it is possible to have a future system which does not simply rest on one single, as it were, hegemon for the future. And they do not see for themselves, I think I've got the box again, they don't see for themselves that future role. Therefore, one of the reasons I encourage a new level of strategic cooperation with China and the United States is to, in fact, encourage that thinking within China and to turn it into practice by specific items of strategic cooperation. And I'll try and stop wobbling at this point. Well, actually, you know what I wanted to be when I finished university? I wanted to be a diplomat. So I went off and did a fair bit of work around the world, including in China. But then I realized that you had to be in the business of public advocacy to make a difference. So what I did then was make a decision to say, well, to do that, you can't be a diplomat or a bureaucrat, you actually have to be in the public political space. So then I got elected to the House of Representatives. Now, the parliamentary system, one thing leads to another. That's kind of how I ended up where I ended up. But my big passion for business are, frankly, our own future as Australia in Asia, which is our home. And secondly, on top of that, how do we, in the future, ensure that we have a safe landing point for the big question of the century, which is the relationship between rising China and the world's containing superpower, the United States. I think we're smart enough to get there. By the way, the continuing mission in life is whatever we can do with a bunch of friendly Aussies, koala huggers, and kangaroo lovers to contribute to that, I think, global cause. Also, as Australia, we have a reasonably unique perspective. We're the West in the East, and as a result of that, I think it brings about a particular perspective. So, thanks for your questions.
To make good on our promise, we do have one of these in the mail to you, much to the chagrin of all 23 million Australians. So while I have you here face to face, we'll apologize to the 23 million Americans. It was a joke. I'm sorry, Australians. It was just a joke. We knew that would get a response. So once again, thanks so much for spending time with us. And I just want to offer this up in all seriousness. I know you're an awesome politician, devout public servant, fantastic scholar, and everything else. But I also know you're a very patriotic and loyal Australian. But if there ever comes a day where you tire of that side of the Pacific and want to come over here, I think run for president. Let me hear it right there.
I think part of a constitutional problem there,
Just details. Details can be ironed out. But thanks again. Okay, go ahead.
This is beer. This is sort of beer with my drink, by the way. 4X gold.
4X.
4X gold. This is a seriously adult beer. Movies on the United States have XXX, I don't know what they're about. If you have an extra X, and this is the seriously adult beer. It's from my home state of Queensland, so guys, when you're visiting Australia, you've got to ask for 4X, because this is our local beer. And I think it's probably one of the best selling brands in the country. Foster's is what we tell you guys to believe that that's what all Australians think. I'll have to come to Virginia Tech one day, so long as I can get a jacket like yours to play games. Serious, like the fashion statement of the world.
Yes, indeed. You come to Blacksburg, sir, you can have a closet full of these suckers. All right? And you are more than welcome anytime on our campus, anytime in our classroom. Once again, from Virginia Tech, let's show some love. Thanks so much, Mr. Rose. Once Scantron, turn in per person. I get 4 volunteers, you get even more credit. Volunteers, stand by the door, there's one. Or actually, we had ushers, I think. We're going to make sure our ushers are by the door. Ushers only take, we don't need any? Okay. We don't need any extra people. Hand 1 Scantron each to your, no, you don't need to take it, you're fine. Ticket will get you in, so you're good. Hope everybody enjoyed that. At least we had a unique experience here this semester.